The idea of a kind of prospective pardon, this sort of permanent federal get-out-of-jail-free card, that seems to be what we're talking about in the case of this, right, with Giuliani and his 3 eldest children who, as far as we know, have not been convicted of a crime. Maybe they've committed a lot, and they don't want to face action. I don't know. It's weird. I wouldn't ask for a pardon. I don't think I deserve one because I don't think I've done anything criminal. But, like, where does that come from, that concept that you can just kind of wave your magic pardon wand?
We have Tish James. We have Xavier Becerra. Mimi Rocha is literally my DA in my town. There will be opportunities to prosecute these people regardless if they abuse the pardon power as they are thinking.
Hopefully, Ellie, there will be a skyfall on this entire crime family, and there will be another day for them to die.
The president does indeed pardon, let's say, Rudy Giuliani or any members of his family. Would you see that, and I asked Preet Bharara this question, as essentially an admission of guilt?
I certainly would view it that way. I think millions of Americans would view it that way. If there was no belief in criminality, why would he think a pardon was necessary?
CNN has learned President Biden will pardon his son Hunter Biden.
Don't take my word for it. President Joe Biden said the same 10 days ago.
Also, sir, on pardons, have you ruled out a pardon for yourself or any other additional members of the family?
For myself?
Yes, sir.
Well, what did I pardon myself for?
That's what I'm asking.
No, I have no contemplation of pardoning myself. I didn't do anything wrong.
So what's the implication there? Well, it's fairly simple, isn't it? That you only need a pardon if you've done something wrong, according to Joe Biden himself. Now, let me say, I don't think that's actually true. I think we live in such a highly politicized criminal justice era that you might need a pardon even if you've done nothing actually illegal. I think Matt Gaetz, given the persecution he was receiving based off of what I think were trumped up charges, I haven't seen any evidence to confirm that he was actually guilty of what they claimed he was, but there was reports that he was in fact seeking a pardon from President Trump during his first term to get them to back off. So I'm not saying that everybody that received a pardon from Joe Biden yesterday is in fact guilty. Let me just make that clear. I will say this, though. I think the vast majority of them are incredibly guilty of incredible crimes. And this is not just me guessing here. This is not me just saying, oh, I don't like the Democrats and therefore they're all guilty, which is essentially what everyone was doing when it came to Trump and his family. They're just saying, well, why would he pardon his kids? Of course, they must be guilty of high, treason. In reality, they had been getting persecuted by a incredibly corrupt criminal justice system, and they definitely needed the pardon so that they could actually live their lives and function, because I don't think there's any evidence, like whatever you feel about Donald Trump, I don't think there's any evidence that his kids have done anything illegal. But they were still dealing with lawfare. The difference being, I can actually prove it, or at least come really close to proving it. I can't come all the way to proving it because we have a secrecy in our government that makes it really, really hard to prove out. However, there is a telltale sign in these pardons that is giving not just smoke, but a little bit of fire, in my opinion. And it is this. Now, they go back to January 1st of 2014. So let's go down a list of, very inconvenient facts that begin in January of 2014. Josie, the redheaded libertarian, did me the honor of pointing it out.
I think Joe Biden's family committed a bunch of crimes.
Does it go back to 2014?
It certainly does.
It sure does.
And so these pardons go back to January 1st, 2014.
A quick question. What was going on in Ukraine in 2014?
I wonder. Burisma?
No. It's not just Burisma. Trust me on that. First off, we got the Maidan Revolution, which happens in 2014, which from all accounts, there's U.S. State Department involvement with Victoria Nuland, where they assist the Ukrainian people. There was genuine discontent, but I think it would have never been successful if not for U.S. State Department backing and funding. That's my opinion. And they overthrew Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine at the time, who was elected, who had agreed to early elections, and they just said, nope, not going to do that. Then, a few months later, Hunter Biden gets signed to the board of Burisma. The biolabs that exist in Ukraine, according to Victoria Nuland, when she was under, cross-examination from Marco Rubio, she acknowledges that these biolabs do indeed exist.
Well, I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure, according to Victoria Nuland, that there are in fact biolabs in Ukraine. Russia claims that the research that was happening in terms of gain of function that was happening at Wuhan was also happening at the biolabs inside of Ukraine. They have used that as part of their justification for the invasion. I'll set that point aside because I can't prove that definitively. However, I think it's probable. I'll say that. So yeah, that's why the pardons go back to January 1st of 2014. It's not just an accident. It's not just trying to prevent lawfare. No, this is a very specific timeline that was utilized for his entire family for a very good reason. Because, in my opinion, again, can't prove all of this, even though I've already demonstrated there's a lot of evidence and a lot of smoke to justify my thesis that there is in fact a fire, that there was an operation being ran in Ukraine in terms of Hunter Biden being what I believe was the bagman for either the U.S. State Department, the DOD, the CIA. I don't know who. You can guess on what I think. I think you guys can guess who I think was responsible, because I don't think you get away with this unless you're at the tippy top. And for the record, I don't think the President of the United States is at the tippy top. So I believe that he was the bagman, that Joe Biden was also, as Vice President of the United States under Barack Obama, he was the head envoy in Ukraine, that none of this is accidental, that the pardons that were issued to this date were not accidental, that they are extraordinarily specific for a very good reason. And I think they made an oops. I think they should have made it a 20-year pardon. But I think they realized that a 10-year pardon, which is what these were, or over 10 years, was already so absurd that they just couldn't go any further. But they had to encompass these dates, and therefore they did. So yeah, Anthony Fauci received a pardon. Hunter Biden, all of his basically Joe's entire family. Okay, like in the waning hours. This literally occurs while Donald Trump is being inaugurated. There's no time left. Zero seconds, 0 minutes left on the clock, and Joe Biden is quietly filing pardon paperwork for everyone in his crime syndicate. And I'm calling it a crime syndicate because I believe there's enough evidence to say that. And I also believe that the pardons demonstrate that I'm not wrong, that you don't do that, especially not to January 1st of 2014, unless there's a specific reason. I think that's the reason. And I think that we've been ruled by an incredibly, incredibly criminal organization, at least for the last 4 years, and probably for our entire lives, but definitely for the last 4 years. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to get into that because, setting aside the inauguration of Donald Trump and all of his executive orders, which I'm going to get into in a second, I think that was actually the biggest news of the day. There will probably never be the investigations necessary to prove definitively what they did. However, what's interesting is that these pardons make it so that the people that receive pardons can no longer plead the fifth, allegedly. This will be tested in court. I don't know if this is actually going to play out this way, but this is what a lot of people are reporting, that because they already have a pardon, they cannot incriminate themselves. They have a blanket pardon. Whatever they did is fine, according to Joe Biden. So when you plead the fifth, you're saying, I don't want to self-incriminate, so therefore I'm not going to speak. Well, you can't be incriminated because you have a pardon. Therefore, you have to tell the truth. And if you don't tell the truth, well, then you're perjuring yourself. That is a crime. Then you go to jail. So that is the thesis by which there may still be investigations. There still is a off chance of being genuine discovery, genuine investigations, genuine prosecutions of those that did not receive a pardon. And more importantly, just to figure out exactly how did this play out? Who was responsible? Like, even if we can't throw everybody that's responsible in jail, let's actually understand the crime syndicate. Let's have the strings and pinboard action to see who directed what, who were they doing this at the behest of, which organizations, which through their agencies. We need to know all that. Our lives were thrown into complete disarray, effective 2020. Why? Why did this happen? What was the end goal? I have my own guesses. I think that, we've gone through this so many times, so I'm going to keep it very brief, but I think they wanted to test our compliance. That's clearly, and then we failed that, by the way. They wanted to bolster corporations and their profit margins, and they did an incredible job at that, closing down so many small businesses across the entire country and across the world. Those are two things. I think they wanted to push through technology when it came to science that was experimental, exploratory. They wanted to test it on a lot of people, and they did. So I think those are like the three avenues. And then I think that there's the distinct possibility that we're dealing with essentially hybrid warfare, that we don't really understand the nature of this entire operation. That, in fact, we could already be in a war with China. That's a possibility. We could be allied with China in a war against other people. We could have agencies that aren't even, or we could have groups that aren't even government agencies that are participating in this conquering, kind of the World Economic Forum, corporate overlord, banking establishment. I don't know. I don't know if they're pulling the strings. There's more questions than answers, unfortunately. But I think we do know enough at this point to know that what we went through was a monstrous psychological operation. Monstrous. And I think that these investigations and these pardons opens up the door by which we may be able to establish who was doing this and hopefully why, so that we can stop it and make sure it never, ever happens again. It's important to note, too, that a lot of people are going to be comparing and contrasting, and they're going to say, well, this isn't that big of a deal because, well, look what Trump did on his first day. He pardoned thousands of people, or over 1,000 people, including essentially or nearly all of the J6ers. The comparison isn't apt. Let me explain. Biden granted a total of 8,064 pardons during his first term, whereas Donald Trump granted 237 pardons during his first term. So yes, you can look at day one Trump second term and say, well, he's pardoning so many people, but that precedent was changed because of the Biden administration. 8,064 pardons during his term, which is the most of any president in my lifetime, I think in history, I'm pretty sure. So that's a lot. That's a lot. Donald Trump can pardon 1,000 people for the next week, and he still wouldn't surpass what Biden did during his presidency. And I hope he does. Now, keep in mind, I'm also not saying that pardon power is necessarily a bad thing. I think that oftentimes, just to give Biden his due, many of the people that were pardoned by Joe Biden, from what I've read, were in fact nonviolent drug offenders. That's fantastic. Let those people out. I completely agree with that. When you're pardoning your family to keep you safe from investigations that would demonstrate your depravity, criminality, and likely treason, well, then I have a much bigger problem with your utilization of pardons. I also have a big problem when it is a blanket pardon that has no explanation. You're not detailing what crimes that these people are participated in, that therefore they shouldn't be prosecuted for. Like, if you're pardoning someone who's already in jail or facing prosecution, well, we know what they're being charged with, so we know what you're pardoning them for. Donald Trump is saying the J6 people, they paid enough price. They many of them spent 2, 3, 4 years in solitary confinement. No matter what you did on that day, no one was killed aside from Ashley Babbitt and a handful of other ladies, Roseanne Boylan, and I think there was like 3 or 4 of the protesters that were killed. But in terms of the cops and the politicians, nobody was. So at what point do you say, well, this is just cruel and unusual punishment? Like, I think it's a fair argument that it is beyond that threshold already. Did anybody do anything that justifies more than 4 years in prison? And if they did, is it dramatically more? Or can we just say, well, given that these prosecutions were so politicized, we're just going to cut it off here. You had your opportunity. You had years of prosecutions, investigations, FBI breaking down people's doors, going, all over the country, going to Alaska, pulling old ladies out of their houses and throwing them in jail. You had all of these years to do that. You had an entire J6 investigation, congressional hearings, this big showy, over-the-top nonsense. I think it was ABC that did it. It was horrifying to witness, honestly. And what you did was you simultaneously hid exculpatory evidence that would have allowed many of these people that were being persecuted and prosecuted to not face jail time. So once you do that, it spoils the entire thing, right? Poisons the well. Like, the well is so poisonous at this point that I think everybody justifiably ought to be released I don't think anybody did anything there that justifies more than a 4-year solitary confinement sentence. And your behavior in the prosecution of these people was so unjust and, in my opinion, criminal, that therefore we're done. All of these pardons from Donald Trump were just. Shout out to my buddy Adam, the podium guy. I got his podium back behind me, actually. I'm thrilled that their horrific journey has ended here, that they get to move on with their lives and not be felons and, actually just get back to life. I think that a lot of the people there that day were there for good reasons, that they were not there to overthrow the government, and they were not there to be violent or hurt police. They were there because they believed things strongly. And I still don't know if I can talk about what they believe, so I'll just leave it at that. I think that they've paid more than enough price, and I think many of them didn't deserve to pay a price whatsoever. In fact, the vast majority of them. So I think that this was a fantastic winning maneuver by Donald Trump. Also, when you contrast it with the riots of the Summer of Love and the lack of prosecution when it came to so many of those people, not to say that all of them weren't prosecuted, but many of them were not. It's just so obvious that anyone who's an impartial observer would just say, well, this is clearly politicized. We had literally just a few months prior to J6, you have the entire nation ablaze. And so many of those people walk scot-free. You have Kamala Harris and others in the Democratic cabal that are putting together fundraising efforts to try and free these people, while simultaneously then turning around and pointing at these J6ers and saying, put them away forever. They tried to overthrow the government, for God's sakes. I mean, it was just, the contrast really highlights how unjust all of that was. And I'm glad to see it end. I really am. And I hope that Donald Trump, there are reports right now, by the way, there are reports right now. Last night, the chair of the Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, confirmed that she has insider from the White House that the pardon for Ross Ulbricht will happen in the next 24 hours. She thought it was going to happen this morning. It has not yet. It appears that it will happen this evening. This is the New York Post reporting this. So I think it's getting more and more official. My guess is that Ross will be pardoned probably by tomorrow and home with his family by this weekend. That'll be fantastic news. I hope. I hope. And not because I want to then go, oh, look, Donald Trump promised us something and he actually delivered. Like, this is about freeing a human being. Freeing a human being that, even if you believe, which many people do, and I understand there is some evidence to say that, like, maybe he was actually responsible for some really bad stuff with the Silk Road, not setting aside the drug charges, which shouldn't be illegal. But even if he is responsible, he didn't kill anybody. He didn't. That's a fact. No one even claims that he did. And he's already spent 11 years in prison. So do we believe in second chances or not? He had no criminal charges prior to that. It's obvious that they threw the book at him because they wanted to go after the Bitcoin community and they wanted to go after decentralized exchange and the dark web and all that. And they made an example of him. 2 life sentences plus 40 years. I think it was plus 40 without the possibility of parole. That is Eighth Amendment violation, cruel and unusual punishment. He deserves to be free. He deserves a second chance. I don't care what you think about the case. It's over a decade. Come on, let's get real. He doesn't deserve more than a decade. So, God willing, that'll happen. And Lynn Ulbricht, who I've had on my show, I hope that you have the best day of your life in the next 72 hours. And I hope you have an incredible remainder of your life after spending a decade fighting for your son to be free. It has filled me with inspiration to see what you've done. And I hope that you get what you deserve, which is your boy back. God willing.
I don't care about what an Indian says. I'm not willing to have a discussion about the definition of what an American is. I'm not interested in hearing somebody else's proposal for what an American is. Everybody knows what an American is. If there's a degree or two of variation between Americans, what an American is, it doesn't matter. Anytime you try to argue in good faith with somebody who wants to steal from you, you try to argue in good faith with somebody who is not going to Iron Man your arguments. You're going to give them every intellectual consideration possible. They're going to give you none. Anytime you even open your mouth to do anything that's not derision, you're losing. You're accepting their proposition that what you know, the same way you know that the sky is blue, what an American is, when you accept that your knowledge of that can be affected by somebody's paragraph, you're already losing. Within your community, within your Discord, within your friend group, whatever, you can have whatever discussion you want. But if it's an outsider who's here telling us how to do business, that's not in the game plan. That's not part of the show. That's not happening. All right? So I'm not saying you need to not think about these things and not talk about them with your friends, whatever. But when an outsider comes here, gets in your face, and starts throwing definitions at you, and you got to Google shit, no, we're not doing that. You're getting called a slur. I don't know which one, whichever one I feel like saying at the moment. You're getting called a slur.
So for those not familiar, that's Sam Hyde. He is an internet sensation, stand-up comic. He issued a Dear Elon video that went, or no, it was Dear Vivek video during, like, right after Christmas, after the H-1B debate, and it went insanely viral. And he's now issued another one today. He's a fascinating character, and I think he makes some really compelling points. Now, I'm not saying that particular segment was the compelling point, but I think that he makes very interesting points about nationalism, Americanism, what it means to be an American. Basically, he's calling Vivek, and he's saying it more or less explicitly, that Vivek is an outsider. Vivek, you may perceive him to be an outsider because he's higher echelon of income. He's worth $500 million. He went to, I think, Princeton and some other, fancy law school. I think it was Yale. Yeah, it was Yale. And you want to say he's not on our level in terms of his upbringing. Goes to private school and He's a valedictorian, worth $500 million. Okay, maybe on a class level, Vivek is not one of us. But in terms of him being an American, he was born in Ohio. He spent 37 years, I think maybe he's 38 now, of his life in America. He's also, made it in America. He also ran for the president of the United States in America. He's an American citizen. Yes, his parents are first-generation immigrants from India. If we are now to the point, and I think this is kind of a natural, pendulum swing, that people went from, I don't mind limited immigration, to now anybody that doesn't even look like me isn't an American, I think is really dangerous, but highly predictable. And I've talked about this in prior episodes when it comes to the phenomenon of Nick Fuentes and the hardline, nationalists and alt-right movements, that they exist. They're definitely real. I don't think that they're as significant as the media would have you believe it, but they are definitely real, and the sentiment is growing. And I think that the reason the sentiment is growing is that no one is actually dealing with them in a reasonable fashion. They're not hearing them out. They're not actually contending with their arguments. They're just saying bad. This is bad. That's really all they have to say. They just call you racist or whatever, and then they move on. But there are arguments to be made that, when it comes to national identity, is that a thing? And is it a thing worth defending? In that same video, later on, Sam Hyde is talking about Japan. And he's saying, I'm praying for Japan. I hope that they can maintain their national identity as being Japanese. Is that racist? Well, from most, I think an impartial observer would say, no, it isn't. It's to say that Japan ought to be Japanese. And that's okay. It's okay to say that. It's okay to feel that way. I don't think it's racist to feel that way at all. And certainly he's not then demonstrating some sort of, identitarian superiority, saying, I don't care what happens to them because they're lesser than me. That would be a true, white supremacist mentality. So I don't think Sam Hyde has that. I think what he does have, though, is a strong sense of nationalistic pride. And then it comes down to, what do you perceive to be the nation? What are the values that make it a nation? And Sam would just call me gay and say, we're not having this debate. Why are you using paragraphs when you can just call me a slur? I understand that, Sam. I respect that. However, for those that are interested in the thought experiment, I think it is worth considering. I think it is worth exploring. What is it to be an American? Is it just being born here? Can you immigrate here and just be an American instantaneously? Well, depends on the laws at the time. I guess technically you could be. But in my view, what makes America special is a belief in essentially the Bill of Rights, the values that it encompassed and cemented for human beings, not just in America, but really more broadly across the world. At least that was the concept. However, I think that the framework was only really applicable to people in America. And it certainly will only be held on to by a people that value it. And I think that's the key. I think that is actually the key to what makes you an American or un-American person, is that do you want to maintain the values that made America special? And from my vantage point, what made America special was not it just being white. I know that's very unpopular amongst the alt-righters, but I don't care because I don't think it's accurate to describe America as only having been special because it was white people that came here. I think what made America continuously special and improving upon itself was that we continued to allow for immigration from all over the world of the best and brightest and the most adventuresome and the most courageous and entrepreneurial to come here and add their spirit to the American endeavor. The American endeavor being one of, in my opinion, the height of really human existence, experience, growth. I think this is why I love America so much, is that I believe that those values are so uniquely special and they are not cherished by the rest of the world, which is why I've become more nationalistic in my later years, is that I've realized that we are, not only are these values very special, but they are fleeting, that we are losing them. And I think that it's a fair concern to say, are we losing them because of so much immigration in such a short period of time? Well, I don't think it's that simple, but I think it plays a part. But I would also add, I think we're losing it because our kids are being indoctrinated and propagandized through the public schooling system and then academia for the cherry on the top of the sundae, where they just tell them everything that makes America special is actually what makes America evil. So that's a big problem. And we're talking millions of kids. I don't know how many millions, but it's at least 1 million kids graduating from college every year. A big percentage of them come out with that ideology. That is super dangerous. You pair with that tens of millions of illegal immigrants over the past 4 years, at least 11 million. This is according to the federal government. I think it's far higher personally. So you add those numbers up and you're talking 3, 4, 5% of the nation in a 4-year period. That's a dramatic change that I don't think that we can acclimate to. And I think what you're witnessing is that the fact that I'm right, sorry, open borders libertarians, I'm right that we're not acclimating to it because it's too rapid. You are now seeing extraordinary racist, nativistic perspectives when it comes to this entire paradigm. They're just saying, fuck you and fuck this, and I'm done. And I'm not concerned with whatever labels you put on me. I'm pissed and I'm ready to fight. That's what they're telling you. You can listen to them or you can ignore them, but they're not going to stop saying it, and they're certainly not going to stop believing it. So I've decided to listen to them. I don't necessarily agree with all their conclusions. I don't, in fact. But I do understand the concern. And I think that it'll benefit us if we have an adult conversation about the pace at which the face of this country is changing. And again, let me remind you, this is a very pluralistic civilization. There is already, I think it's only 55 or 60% of the country that's white. You have every other color, creed, race, religion under the sun that exists and coexists in America. That is very unique. That is not a thing that happens in the rest of the world. So unless you want to just assume that we're going to be successful, no matter how fast you allow for more and more immigrants to come into this country, I am not convinced that you're right at all. In fact, I'm totally convinced at this point that you're wrong, that it will be our undoing. And if we could remedy the issues that come from academia, perhaps the immigration issue wouldn't be such a huge problem. But honestly, if it weren't for what's happening in academia, I don't think we would have a governmental model that is permitting such an incredible flood of migrants, all part of the same program, in my view. So we need reforms on all levels. And this gets me into the executive orders that came from Donald Trump just yesterday.
Look at China, how filthy it is. Look at Russia. Look at India. It's filthy. The air is filthy. The Paris Accord, I took us out because we were going to have to spend trillions of dollars, and we were treated very unfairly. When they put us in there, they did us a great disservice. They were going to take away our businesses. I will not sacrifice tens of millions of jobs, thousands and thousands of companies because of the Paris Accord. It was so unfair. China doesn't kick in until 2030. Russia goes back to a low standard, and we kicked in right away. It would have destroyed our businesses. So
today I want to tell you about our sponsor, Monetary Metals. Gold prices have been breaking all-time highs in 2024, and now you can get your gold to work for you, generating interest income every month, paid in additional ounces of physical gold. You can earn up to 5% on your gold and silver in their lease offerings, and accredited investors can earn double-digit returns in their bond offerings. Again, all the interest is paid in ounces, which are stored for free on your behalf. So, if you're tired of your gold and silver collecting dust at home, or worse, racking up fees having your metal professionally stored, check out monetary-metals.com/lockdown. Again, that's monetary-metals.com/lockdown to learn how you can start putting your metal to work today. First up, executive order from Donald Trump signed yesterday notifies the UN that we are, in fact, the United States is exiting the Paris Climate Treaty or the Paris Climate Accords. This was the guidelines that requires basically a cap on carbon emissions. There's a lot more details to it. It requires additional funding and taxes that we have to send to the UN and all sorts of fucking nonsense. In my opinion, this is a unmitigated good. I am not a believer in anthropogenic climate change. I do think that there's obvious evidence that, in fact, the climate is changing, but I don't think that it's proven or rock solid science by any stretch of the imagination that it is this imminent cataclysmic thing that is strictly driven by humanity. In fact, I think it's quite to the contrary. I think the vast majority of the climate change that we're dealing with is natural. It's a product of the sun's fluctuations as well as Earth. So just look at the fear mongering that we dealt with from Al Gore back in the early 2000s and all of the predictions he made and what aspect of those have come true. Well, guess what? I'm in Florida, actually in Miami, which was supposed to be underwater by now. Oops. Didn't exactly happen. Now did it. So yeah, back to the drawing board on that one. Anyways, I don't like being in these global treaties, particularly when it's, as Donald Trump pointed out, super unfair. China, who's this incredible polluter, doesn't even have to get on board with it until 2030, and who knows if they will, but America gets on board with it right away to the detriment of the American people and us having to fund it and get taxed into oblivion, not to mention killing businesses and jobs and everything else. I think this is just, as I said, an unmitigated good. Good job, Donald Trump. Yes, stay out of the Paris Climate Accords. I'm sure the next president will put us right back in them, but we get a reprieve for at least 4 years, so let's hope. Next up, we have an executive order from Donald Trump notifying all federal employees, or close to all. There's some that have their own unions that will be cut out of this deal, but all of the rest of them, the majority, have to go back to work. Yeah, I know you might be surprised by this, but a huge percentage of employees after the lockdown era ended up doing work from home deals. This ends effective immediately. So we'll see. I think that the good aspect of this, one, I think that federal employees are already not very productive or useful. So I think that putting them back, requiring them to actually go to work and demonstrate that they're doing a job that's worth the taxpayers' funds, I don't have a problem with that. I think that that's a good thing. I think it's a step in the right direction. And I think that we will see a lot of people quit. And I think a lot of the people that quit will be doing so to the benefit of the American people because they are not providing us a good return on investment. So that's fantastic news. I think that this is a step in the right direction. It's a kind of minor one, but that's another executive order that he passed. Let's get to the next. He then signed an executive order that ended the weaponization of government against political opponents. I don't know what kind of teeth this thing has. It's just kind of a TBD. Certainly the criminal justice system has been weaponized. I don't know what power the president actually has to stop future administrations from doing the same thing, but it's performative if nothing else. He then signed an executive order rescinding 78 of Biden's executive actions. I haven't looked at all 78, but just based off of what I know of his executive orders, I'm happy. I think it's really good to get rid of whatever we can of Biden's legacy, as I think he was a disastrous president on almost every single level. I think he's the worst in my lifetime, and there's been a lot of bad presidents. A lot of people argue George W. Look, for the Middle East, I'll grant you, definitely worse. For the American people in terms of the Patriot Act and the spying apparatus, yes. However, lockdowns, mandates, World War III, hundreds of thousands perished combined between Palestine and Ukraine, and he also did all of this only in 4 years, whereas George W. did it in 8. I think there's an argument that Biden was worse, but whatever. They're both terrible. Who really cares who was worse? They both deserve to be in prison, in my opinion. Then next up, he signs an executive order freezing federal hiring. This is great. The reason he's doing this is because it will take at least a few weeks, probably a few months, to get through confirmations of all of his people, to get them to bring in their staff to replace the old Biden administration staff. Do you want those people hiring more federal employees when they're Biden staff? No, you do not. So essentially, he's put a freeze until all of his people are in, and then there'll be more hiring. I think that's good. Put a stop on the bleed, as they say. I already covered the fact that he pardoned 1,500 J6ers. I think that's an unmitigated good. Once again, here's where Donald Trump and me and MAGA may be at loggerheads. I don't know. I think that actually that there probably are a lot of Trump supporters that will agree with me on this, but I could be wrong. He issued an executive order. Cartels, drug cartels, are foreign terrorist organizations.
This is actually an executive order designating the cartels and other organizations to be foreign terrorist organizations.
That's a big one.
Yes, sir.
People have wanted to do this for years. So they are now designated as terrorist organizations, foreign. And Mexico probably doesn't want that. But we have to do what's right. They're killing our people. They're killing 250, 300,000 American people a year. Not 100, like has been reported for 15 years. It's probably 300,000.
So as you can tell there, his claim being that the fentanyl crisis is, in fact, terrorism somehow. Look, terrorism has a very specific definition, and it's usually that you're using violence for political ends. I don't see a justification to label the Mexican drug cartels as terrorists. Now, I think that they're obviously criminal, and especially the human traffickers, and I'd love to see them stopped, and I'd love to see the border secured because it has been a very significant problem. However, I don't think that you're going to be able to stop the flow of drugs regardless of what you do. I think you'll be lucky to stop the flow of people. That's a real justifiable concern because that actually falls under national security. I think that drugs are not, the war on drugs has lasted 50 years. We lost it, okay? Y'all lost it because I was never fighting it. Y'all lost the war on drugs. Can we move on? The answer apparently is no. But I do understand this is, once again, kind of the same issue that I was talking about with the open borders and the nativistic kind of racist perspectives that gain strength during these periods. Same thing with drug prohibition. This is the worst of both worlds. You have drugs that are illegal in terms of fentanyl, heroin, yada, yada, yada. But then you also have legal drugs that are being prescribed to millions of Americans over a 20-year period from Big Pharma legally that hooks them on opioids, and then you have reforms or whatever that kick them off of these prescriptions, or they just can't afford them, or they just decide to go to something stronger, and they end up doing street-level opioids. This is a bigger problem than the border. So I am not going to be myopic about this and say, oh, you close down the border and all of a sudden everything's fixed. And I think that's really my bigger point. This is not the fix that Trump is advertising it is, but this is red meat to his base. They know a lot of people that they've lost due to the opioid crisis, fentanyl in particular, and they want it stopped, and they don't care what he has to do it. So this is what happens. This is what happens when you ignore a genuine problem, and then the state intervenes, and it may present a solution that ends up being a bigger problem. Why do I say that? Well, I'm not exactly interested in going to war with Mexico. Are you? Don't get it twisted. I think that Mexico, to a large extent, is a narco state. Their government is controlled, or at least they share power to a huge extent with the drug cartels. That's obvious. I don't want to go to war with the cartels because more or less we're then going to war with the government, or we're at least requiring the government of Mexico to go to war with the cartels. And guess what? The cartels do business in every major American city across the United States. They have tunnels, they have weapons, many of which have been given through Operation Fast and Furious from the Barack Obama administration. Like, these are trained, dangerous people. And I just hope people are really considering what this means, where this might go. If you decide to actually declare war and the cartels decide to declare war back, that you could see major, like, you're labeling them terrorists, even though they don't do terroristic things in America, unless you want to say the human trafficking, but that's still not terrorism because they're not trying to get a political. Anyways, I think that you could see terroristic activity in the United States as a consequence of if you start to use drones or, you know, special ops to go after heads of the cartels. Will they just accept that, or will they decide to try and make us pay a price too? I don't know. That's TBD. Obviously, I hope not. But I think that this is not without risk. I think this is not without risk of turning into a much wider war. Additionally, if you want to make the claim that these people are a national security threat to the United States of America, well, then get Congress to actually vote on this thing. Vote for a war. I know you guys don't do that anymore. You haven't done it in my lifetime, longer than I've been alive. But it's so obvious that you're labeling them a terrorist organization so that the CIA can go after them. Right? I mean, we all know this. It also then allows for a bunch of unconstitutional illegal shit like torture, rendition, all sorts of other stuff, all without a declaration of war. To me, it's quite obvious that they are operating under the AUMF, Authorized Use of Military Force, after 9/11, after the Patriot Act. And I think that's what this is. I think it's a way of circumventing congressional action to actually try and go after this problem, and instead circumventing the entire system and just saying, I'm going to do whatever I want to stop this. Look, if Joe Biden did it, I'd oppose it. Donald Trump's doing it, I oppose it. Or at least I'll say this. It has the potential for real dire consequences, and I'm not sure that it'll be productive in terms of stopping drugs. So that's my stance. A lot of people are just going to clap blindly without thinking this thing through. If anything, whether you support it or not, I hope you think about it a little bit more deeply, because it's not without risk. Like, it is going to create an incredibly interesting paradigm. Now, if it's just used for leverage to put pressure on the government of Mexico to essentially do the bidding of the United States to try and stop the flow of humanity coming into our country, okay, I can see that argument. Like, it's kind of like the using tariffs in game theory. Is that what he's doing? Maybe. I don't know. That's what he's doing with the northern border. He's threatening tariffs against Trudeau, even though he's on his way out, whoever's going to be in charge of Canada in the next couple months. He's saying, look, you get your border under control, or I'm going to tariff you guys too. This is all game theory stuff. Will his bluffs work? And are they bluffs? I don't know. Stay tuned, but think these things through. Just really consider, like, are you prepared to have a war on your border? Like, we haven't had that in our lifetimes. I haven't. I don't know about you. I don't remember there being a war with Mexico or Canada or Cuba even in my lifetime. So this is a different thing than having a war in the Middle East or Ukraine or a proxy war elsewhere. This can get spicy fast. So think it through. He also signed an executive order repealing all DEI programs across the federal government. Fantastic. Absolutely love that. I've already gone into detail about how evil and un-American DEI is, so I'll spare you the lecture. We all, I think, are on the same page with that. He also signed an executive order securing the southern border. I think that is the answer, as opposed to going to war with the cartels. You probably ought to just secure the border, but, you know, is what it is. He also signed an executive order granting TikTok an extension to sell to an American buyer. I am still not convinced that they ought to be forced, and I'm not sure that Supreme Court it's constitutional, but according to me and property rights, I don't understand the justification. They did it under a national security threat purview. I'm not at all convinced that TikTok is a national security threat and that it's some propaganda tool from the CCP. I think the arguments that Tim Pool and others have made in that regard are lacking, and I would love to go on IRL and debate this issue, but at some point I'm sure I will. A reprieve and finding a way to make this work is a good idea. Let me also emphasize 180 million Americans use TikTok, and I don't know how many of them use it for business purposes, but it's not a small amount. And those that aren't even using it for business use it to get their message out there. And they value that tremendously. Again, let me repeat, no conflict of interest here. I don't have a TikTok account, okay? Maybe I'll get one after this. I haven't thought about it really, but there's a lot of value to the American people when it comes to that app. Like, There's a reason that people are so pissed off about it. And I respect that. I respect their desire to be able to speak freely. Like I've poured so much time and energy into Twitter, now X. If it were to be banned by the government because they said, oh, Elon Musk is under the influence of a hostile government, which was one of the 4 or 5 that they listed, and they forced Elon to sell to Jack Dorsey, which then put it back under the purview of basically the deep state, that'd be hell. That'd be terrible for me. And if Elon then said, you know what, I'm not going to sell, and they just shut it down, well, then I've now lost a multi-$100,000, if not multi-million-dollar marketing vehicle, which is my Twitter account. So yeah, I feel for the people that use TikTok daily, and I hope that this can be worked out. I really do. Next up, he signs an executive order creating or establishing DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency. Will that be a real thing? I mean, it's a thing now. It's a real thing, but it's still an advisory board. It doesn't really have teeth, as best I can tell. It will be very interesting. I'm going to stay optimistic and just believe that they're going to get some things accomplished. But at this point, I don't know what it will amount to. I will say I was very saddened to see Vivek Ramaswamy unceremoniously removed from that role. He was supposed to be a major participant in it. There's lots of conflicting reports about why he dropped out. It seems to me as if he's going to be running for the governor of Ohio, if not the Senate seat in Ohio. I'm not sure which he's going to do at this point, but it's quite obvious to me that his H-1B stance was so unpopular, in part because of Sam Hyde's response and the incredible firestorm that was created around that debate topic, that he kind of screwed himself. Like people were so mad. I've never seen anything like it. Like he went from almost like universally beloved to, like half of the people that loved him were just like, fuck you. It was wild. I feel terrible for him because I like the guy a lot. And I think that his heart's in the right place. And I don't think that he meant to be insulting. But clearly a lot of people felt insulted. And, this is American politics. You got to figure out a way to say it without blowing people up. But it's very interesting to me because at the end of the day, like Elon also lost a lot of goodwill, by the way. But Trump comes out and he basically says the same thing. He's like, yeah, we need to have the best people come here and yada, and H-1Bs are important.
There's been some debate within your orbit over whether or not to keep or eliminate H-1B visas. What's your position on that? Do you want to keep H-1Bs or do you want to get rid of them?
I like both sides of the argument, but I also like very competent people coming into our country, even if that involves them training and helping other people that may not have the qualifications they do. But I don't want to stop. And I'm not just talking about engineers. I'm talking about people at all levels. We want competent people coming into our country. And HB1, I know the program very well. I use the program. Maitre d's, wine, experts, even waiters, high quality waiters. You got to get the best people. Now, then you go into people like Larry, and he needs engineers, and Massa needs, and this gentleman needs engineers like nobody's ever needed engineers, right? So we have to have the quality people coming in. Now, by doing that, we're expanding businesses, and that takes care of everybody. So I'm sort of on both sides of the argument, but what I really do feel is that we have to let really competent people, great people come into our country, and we do that through the H-1 program.
And that was kind of what Elon and Vivek were saying it, but Vivek was saying it with a brown face. And they're like, not you. You don't get to say this to us. And I was like, all right, yeah, that's an interesting stance. But Trump says it, no biggie. Vivek says it, and it's like, you're dead to me. Lesson learned, I guess. Anyways, I think that the Doge operation is another big part of the reason that I supported Trump, and I hope that it becomes something very meaningful. We'll see. He then signs an executive order to withdraw from the World Health Organization. I think this is fantastic. It's another global organization that was involved in the pandemic. Wink. I despise everyone involved in the WHO. Tedros and all these fucking lying scumbags. So glad to be out of that. He also signed an executive order protecting American women from the dangers of radical gender ideology, basically going after, transgender people in women's sports. Obviously, I don't think it's right for biological men to be in sports against biological girls. I think that's a terrible idea. However, are we really to the point where we need the federal government to tell every state to not do that? And I'm like, maybe we are. That's so depressing to think about. Like, they're not going to figure it out. Like, this is terribly unjust. We really need the feds to come in and tell you can't do that. So I don't know how I feel about that. I think it's obviously federal overreach, but at the same time, like, I do think it's the right thing to do. So I'm torn. Sorry. He also issued an executive order ending the catch and release policy, which I think was obviously absurd in the first place. If you're going to be having a border at all, you can't have a policy of catching and releasing everybody coming across it. That only incentivizes more and more people to come across it, which is what we saw to the tune of 11 million at minimum over the past 4 years. So, yeah, that needed to stop. He also signed an executive order restoring the Remain in Mexico policy. We'll see if Mexico actually enforces it. The new president there, I think her name's Sheinbaum, which is a very interesting name for a Mexican president. She is going back and forth, playing hardball verbally, but maybe she will actually play ball with Trump ultimately. He also appealed the rule allowing transgender troops to serve in the military. According to Libs of TikTok, the tax dollars were also funding full gender transitions for service members. If that's true, that's unbelievable to me. Look, I'm not in the military, so I'll let soldiers speak for themselves as to whether or not they want to serve with transgender people. I'm of the opinion as a man that I would probably not want to be serving on the front lines, at least, with trans people or women, because they couldn't carry me out of there. Most of them would struggle. I weigh over 200 pounds. I'm 6'1". Like, only the most freakishly strong woman is going to be able to save me from going down on the front line. So, like, I think rationally, yeah, probably not the best idea, not the best role for them to be in, just as most women would not be able to play in the NFL, right? Like, I know this is very, very bold, chauvinistic, sexist things to say, but let's just be honest here. Should trans people not be able to be in the military at all, like even in service roles or like backup roles? I don't know. I don't know if a blanket rule is necessary here, but I think once again this just shows the pendulum swinging harder than it probably had to. So it is what it is. I think what was really interesting is he signs an executive order revoking the security clearance of the 51 former intelligence officials who lied about Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, obviously, I agree with this. These people are terrible, and they lied to you through their fucking teeth about what was happening with that laptop as the FBI had it in their possession, and they just egregiously lied. They issued that letter so that during the debate, Joe Biden could go up there and he could lie to the American people saying 51 intelligence officials say that this story is bullshit, so Donald Trump's a liar. In reality, we all knew, or at least those in the independent media space knew, and those that listen to this knew, that they were lying. That we knew that that laptop was real, and them burying the story was just to help the Democrats win the White House. And it did.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
Obviously, I agree with him removing the security clearances. What I don't agree with is if this is the end of the punishment for these folks, that is not enough. I mean, that is, in my opinion, definitional election interference from federal employees, no less, which some would argue is treasonous behavior. So you got to do something other than just stripping them of their security clearances. Like, that's not nearly adequate enough, but it's a start. It's a step in the right direction. We'll see. This is more performative nonsense, and I don't really understand the rationale for it. I guess I could theorize some things, but Donald Trump also issued an EO claiming or renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Here's my assumption. One, he's trying to, just have anything to put on his resume as like being an important president. There's always the ego aspect of anything Donald Trump does. I think there's also the argument that he's trying to claim it as property and justify further control of deep sea drilling for oil and gas. That would be kind of my more sinister expectation as to why this distinction might be made. But I think at the end of the day, like, there's probably already contract law that's in place for this. So can we just claim Mexico is now named South United States and we now control it? Like, no. So is there any teeth to this change? And I'm guessing not. So it seems just like performative virtue signaling, but like in a nationalistic pro-America sense. It's very strange. Very strange. And last but not least, and maybe my favorite, he put a 90-day pause on all foreign aid. All foreign aid. That's what the initial executive order said. And then I find out that there's a little cutout, little caveat for our friends over in Israel. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, man. Like, he does so much, like everything that happens, they do so much to add to the conspiracy theorists or like the anti-Semitic worldview of like, we're doing everything at the best Israel. And then you have some evidence like this and you're like, what am I supposed to say about this? What the fuck am I supposed to say about this? And keep in mind, we give aid to fucking everybody. We're sending billions here, billions there. Like almost everybody in the Middle East gets a little fucking chunk of change from us. And sometimes it's not so little, billions usually. It's just nuts. It's nuts. Look, I can't blame the Groyper audience that goes, look at this. This is proof. Like, what am I supposed to fucking say to defend against that? Yeah, you're making a singular cutout for one nation while you put a freeze on aid to all other countries. Anyways, my point would be, doesn't go far enough. It ought to be not a 90-day freeze. It ought to be a 4-year freeze to everybody, including our greatest ally. No foreign aid. We're $37 trillion in debt. We can't fucking afford it. We're not doing this anymore. We're done. Okay? That would be a step in the right direction. I think that overall, Donald Trump had a very good first day. I'm very nervous about his actions declaring drug cartels as terrorist organizations because I think that is just a methodology to circumvent normal protocols when it comes to using extraordinary violence that would normally be classified as war against our neighbor, Mexico. So that is probably the thing I disagreed with him most on. I think the other things were kind of marginal, not huge changes, but I think overall he delivered on the vast majority of his promises. And I think that if Ross Ulbricht gets to go home tomorrow, which I think he will have delivered on his promises to the libertarians as well. So all in all, not so bad. I think, there's another controversy with Elon, who's flashing a Roman salute during the fucking inauguration speeches afterwards.
Thank you. My heart goes out to you.
And I'm just, it's a big story. I could show you the corporate media, saying this guy, he's showing you his true colors. Actually, he's a fascist. Couldn't even wait 1 hour after Trump gets inaugurated to be throwing Nazi salutes around. It's like, look, I honestly believe, and if I thought for a second that he was in fact some secret Nazi, I would say it. I would absolutely say it. I think that Elon Musk has high functioning autism, and when he gets overstimulated, he does weird shit. And I know you're going to say, oh, you're just carrying water for the guy. There's no evidence. What kind of Nazi argues in favor of H-1Bs? What kind of Nazi puts on the hat and goes to Israel with Ben Shapiro? He's a fucking pretty bad Nazi, if so, right? So what are we arguing here? But corporate media is still going to argue it. I think he spazzed out. That's my honest opinion. I think he spazzed out. And as a libertarian who knows lots of autists, not the first time I've seen someone spaz out and do some weird shit. So that's my thesis. Oh, by the way, when he did it, he also said, I'm throwing my love to you. So he tried to explain the motion that he was making, but I'm not going to lie. It was funny as hell. And he definitely looked like a fucking idiot doing it. So, oh, God.
And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
So about 9 months ago, I was sitting there, I don't know, 8th row or something like that. Dead center, right there. And I can't believe it happened. So here's the advantage of doing tape-delayed stuff. I got, as soon as I was done recording, I then went back to Twitter and I checked, and sure as shit, he announced it. This is what Donald Trump posted. He says, I just called the mother of Ross William Ulbricht, he misspelled his name, but whatever, to let her know that in honor of her and the libertarian movement, which supported me so strongly, it was my pleasure to have just signed a full and unconditional pardon of her son, Ross. The scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern-day weaponization of government against me. He was given 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Ridiculous. Yes, President Trump, it is ridiculous. And, man, as you can tell, I've been crying. I can't hide it. I can't lie about it. So I just texted Lynn. I'm thrilled beyond words that this lady who I've now met and spent time with, I don't know, a dozen times at a dozen different events. She is such a nice person, and she fought so tirelessly for her son. She puts all parents to shame in terms of just her indomitable will. And she's so nice. You would never suspect someone to be so nice and yet such a fighter. And just all of her kindness belies this incredible, burning drive to get her fucking son out of prison. She's a fucking hero, man. She is just, I don't want to cry again, but my God, what an incredible human being. And, all right, not going to cry again. Thank you, President Trump. Not going to cry. Thank you, President Trump, for keeping your promise. A lot of people didn't believe it. A lot of people didn't believe it. And he delivered. So I can't believe I'm crying again. If you knew her, trust me, if you knew her, you'd understand why this is so special to me. There's not a person on the planet that deserves this victory more than Lynn Ulbricht. She's such a fucking awesome human being, and she's such a fighter. And I gotta just take a second to thank Angela McArdle, for her to have put her reputation on the line the way she did. Sure, Dave and I did too, but she was in a position of authority within the Libertarian Party, and she negotiated this deal when, she could have lost her chair position. She could have been sued, or who knows what she was ultimately risking in doing this. And so many people doubted her. So many people. And she demonstrated the same will that Lynn did. Just unbelievable fight and courage. It's very inspirational. Very. He gets to go home. I never thought I'd see it. Oh, man. Wow. I've never felt as if, activism could actually change the world. And you can say it's minor. And some, if you want to go to the full macro analysis, yes, it's minor. It's one man freed. It's one family restored. You're right. It's minor. But it's not to them. To them, it's everything. To Lynn, it was her whole world. And I'm just so overwhelmed. To everyone that believed, to everyone that fought, thank you. You made the world just a little bit better. Third time crying on Liberty Lockdown. God damn it. I hate it when I do this. But it's it's real. These are my real emotions. I love this lady, and I can't imagine that her son's not a great person after knowing her as long as I have and as much time as I've spent with her. She's just such a gem. She's such a gem. You know what? And even if Ross is a scumbag, she still deserves to have her son back, and he deserves a second shot at life. And I'm going to be rooting for them. And I'm not going to be inviting them on my podcast. This is not a clout chasing thing. I'm not trying to do that. I just wanted her to have her son back, and she does. In the next 24 hours, she will get to hug her boy. That's beautiful. Love you guys. Bye. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found it informative. I will be back with you guys again here shortly. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 400 of Liberty Lockdown. I was going to have a special guest on today, but I decided to save them for a future episode. I had a lot to talk about. I don't really need a guest when I have a lot to talk about, so we're going to ride solo. If you guys enjoyed it, do hit the like button, subscribe, share it around, leave 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen. And wherever you're watching, hit the like button and subscribe. And hug and kiss your mother. Tell your father that you appreciate everything he did for you if he's still in your life. And yeah, be good to your kids if you have kids. Yeah, I never get to say that one because I don't have kids yet. So you be good to your kids. And yeah, if you're lucky enough to have your grandparents, call them right now and tell them you love them so much. And it'll mean a lot. And yeah, just have a good life. I don't know why I'm in such a good mood. It's not like I got anything, cataclysmic, life-changing over the past 48 hours, but I'm feeling good today. So I hope you guys are too. Appreciate you. See you soon. Peace.
I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?